Lovely. Thank you, Jeffrey, and welcome everybody. And it is wonderful to see so many faces that I recognise, although this might be a little bit boring for you because I'm going to describe what we do at THMP, which you ladies and guys already know. Hi, Asma, I can see you up there. So, the Tower Hamlets Community Mediation Project. So the global law firm, the wonderful Reed Smith LLP, and myself, we partnered up in 2016 to bring community mediation back to Tower Hamlets residents. The Tower Hamlets Mediation Service had run out of funding years ago, and it left the borough mediationless. Apparently that's not a word, but I think you guys can make out what I mean. So THMP presently offers interested partner organisations within Tower Hamlets the opportunity to provide mediation as an option for their neighbours in conflict. There is no cost whatsoever to any of our clients. The service is carried out mainly by Reed Smith's pro bono guys. So all LBTH residents can access our mediation. So there has been 3 cohorts of Reed Smith solicitors trained as community mediators, and they are the core of the project. But THMP has 50 other volunteers on our WhatsApp group, half of who are on here today, I think. These other volunteers are a merry bunch, all passionate about mediation. So THMP is a community of community mediators, as well as a much needed service. We needed more mediators when we kicked off due to the number of referrals that we were receiving. So I put out a call through Dave Owen on here, put out a call through his list. I was thinking I might get 6 or 7 replies, but I was inundated with mediators just wanting an opportunity to either get some practice mediating or actually just wanting to contribute to a worthy cause. So our project provides a comprehensive and effective mediation process, and we cover everything from the intake of mediation referrals, the consultation with the parties, the individual party visits in their own home, which of course at the moment, for obvious reasons, that's not happening. Everything is now online. We set up joint meetings when and if both parties agree. If they want a written agreement, we also do that. And then if, with their permission, we send a copy to the referrer. And then if needed, we do follow-up and then we close it for the referral agent. So it's kind of a complete, everything is done for them. So THMP handles all aspects of the mediation and works with the parties to provide any support needed throughout the referral. And here is where we are probably a little bit different to other community services, community mediation services, I should say, in so much as that we provide above and beyond the actual mediation. In my experience living and working in Tower Hamlets for almost 40 years, I have, a really good understanding of what the issues are. I've experienced and observed the lack of services and gaps in service provision, which can leave people in desperate need of support. So I encourage our mediators to step outside the process if need be, to maybe signpost or to help people to access other services such as adult social services or Mind. And I know Natalia is on here. At one point, Natalia was able to signpost this very, very isolated and lonely lady towards one of the farms in the borough because she loved animals and didn't have access to them and missed them. So THMP values and ethos. At Tower Hamlets Mediation Project, all our parties get VIP treatment. That's validation, inspiration, and positive action. Because we know that conflict brings about the negative feelings of VIP, vulnerability, impatience, and pessimism. We promise we always treat our parties in a fair way with their best interests at heart. Our values are really important to us, and so we help our parties to communicate from a place of esteem rather than embarrassment. So, what's our definition of mediation? Mediation is a process where independent, impartial mediators help parties to recognize and acknowledge their place in a dispute. It's voluntary and works best when the parties involved are willing to look for a solution. We help to empower the parties to take responsibility for resolving the conflict. Community mediation is a confidential process and is flexible to the needs of all the participants. However, at THMP, I am open to offering a little more feedback to the referral officers than I was permitted to do at Tower Hamlets Mediation Service. It was always a bugbear for the housing officers not to be able to share with them any information, even who refused mediation or who went ahead with it. So now THMP mediators tell our parties that we will be feeding the outcome of the mediation back. The content still remains confidential, obviously, and we can also share a copy of the agreement with permission. So at the very least, we find it's helpful to share who participated in the process. So our mediators facilitate the process without giving advice or expressing opinions. We help the parties to outline a realistic way forward. Then the mediators work in an empathic and non-judgmental way, always. We're very informal. It's kind of my bag, informal. I'm probably the most informal mediator you'll ever meet. And so I encourage our THMP mediators to be informal too. I think that helps to put our parties at ease, and then they can engage fully and really give it a good shot. So normally our mediators meet the parties individually in their own home initially and work in pairs to role model respectful and assertive communication. If both parties agree, mediators will arrange a neutral venue to bring them together. The parties are encouraged to talk openly to each other, and the mediator facilitates a safe conversation where they can acknowledge differences and recognize common grounds and shared needs, at present due to obvious reasons. But I am noticing, since it went online, an increase in the take-up of joint sessions, because in community mediation, you don't always get joint sessions. I never push for them. But it seems to be that it's easier for parties not to have to go to this neutral venue and sit in the same room with someone that they've had a screaming row with. On screens from the safety of our own living room, people can actually turn us off if the notion takes them. We don't encourage anyone to do that, of course, but we do tell them that they can withdraw at any point. So our mediators control the process of mediation while the parties control the content. Mediation allows for a frank exchange, airing of views, and, most importantly, a space to take responsibility for the resolution. So our mediators are not judges, arbitrators, advocates, counselors, advisors, fixers, or friends. We don't give advice, suggestion, or solutions, and we do not have the answer to their problems. Our principles of mediation, I think they're probably the same as all the principles that you guys are working with: impartiality, independence, neutrality, voluntary participation, and confidentiality. So the outcomes of mediation, we're hoping for empowerment, choice and responsibility, realistic expectations, options, and future communication, because that's one of the most important things. Sometimes the actual dispute is a red herring. It's the fact that they can't talk about the conflict. That's normally the problem. So our visits are standalone pieces of work, independent of any other part of the mediation process, and I've kind of touched on that already. All household members present are given the chance to speak for themselves. All family members involved in the conflict are encouraged to be present. Interpreters are used when English is the second language of any household member involved in the neighbour dispute, and more on this in a minute. So, community mediators explain that they are impartial and independent of the landlord, and that helps to reduce the parties' inhibitions. Mediators explain the principles of mediation with a particular focus on confidentiality. And then they listen to the parties' account, and they help to identify the main issues. They ask clarifying questions, and they summarize what they've heard. Summaries are so important. They help the party to take responsibility, and they encourage a free flow of information about the situation. Mediators explore options with the parties and affirm what they've done so far, and then encourage new ideas for getting their needs met. Reality testing options and checking as they move forward from positions to interests and needs. Mediators help the parties to discover their own solution and make choices based upon realistic expectations. At the end of the visit, parties are clear about what they want to do next. And if both parties agree to a joint meeting, the mediators arrange this. So at this point, I'd like to shut up and introduce one of our volunteer mediators, Nazneen Malik.
Thank you, Irene, and welcome all. What I'd like to do is just give a little brief of my history, so personal history and professional history. I was born in Pakistan and came to the UK in the very early 60s. My father being in the army, which meant that we moved around a lot within Pakistan, obviously. But that experience allowed me to experience intra-cultural differences. Excuse me. At the time, obviously, I didn't know that's what I was experiencing, but I was experiencing different parts of the country where people dressed very differently, held different values, different views, different way, different foods, and sometimes the dialects were extremely different. We settled in Yorkshire and we had some very positive experiences and then not so very positive experiences. I guess I had a great deal of resilience in my DNA, being brought up with an army father. Maybe not, but I was quite resilient. Even so, it was tough to see and experience what we experienced. I just want to recall just a very small example of what I'm talking about. I was 12, and my older sister was 13. And we used to walk to school together, but on the way we were always confronted by two particular young boys about a similar age who would pull my sister's hair and actually punch her and not me for some reason. Being the younger sibling, but I was very protective of my sister, who was quite timid in a way. That one day, taking a lot of the abusive language and the physical abuse, I decided to actually have a go at the two boys, and actually we had got into a little bit of a tussle, and the boys, believe me, got off worse than us. But as I recall, the emotional impact stayed with me for some time. Fighting wasn't in my blood, so having to fight was very emotionally upsetting. From a young girl in Yorkshire, then to a married woman with children, I've always lived in what we term in an area that only had a handful of non-white people. And I'd like to sort of come back to that a little bit later on. My professional background, I worked in a number of organisations, various organisations, but in the late 90s, I decided to go solo, having the confidence own confidence in my own abilities. I ran my own consultancy initially in HR and training, but then later expanded that into organisational and people development. And I ran that for about 17 years, securing interim assignments across private, public, regulatory, NHS, housing associations, and you name it, I sort of was in there at both the strategic and the operational level. the reason I went interim was it provided me the ideal solution to help me grow and hone my knowledge and skills. And also, working in diverse sectors and geographical areas provided me with the environment to experience people of different cultures and to have the confidence to deliver in different cultural settings. As we know, conflict in some shape or form exists in all parts of life. And I had a passion for resolving disputes in the workplace and was known as the go-to person to help resolve any conflicts that was arising. Resolving disputes in the workplace, albeit on an informal basis, gave me the direction to become a mediator. And I am now a trained community, workplace, civil and commercial mediator, which brings me enormous, deep pleasure in mediating. That's a little bit about me. So you might think, well, why are the two of us taking part in this talk? When I trained as a community mediator in 2013 by Irene Grindell, co-mediation was used for health and safety reasons, as the first visits took place in the individual's home. Back then, and even more so now, I question why co-mediation model isn't used in commercial and civil or workplace settings. For me, the benefits outweigh the monetary loss that mediators may incur from using this model. In my humble opinion and experience, having a co-mediator adds value. Between the two, they reach the parts that perhaps one mediator can't. And for those of us who are old enough to remember that Guinness advert, that Guinness reaches the parts that other beers can't. So for me, co-mediation is of great value. From my own experiences as a consultant, I had come up against many challenges and even racism, be it subtle, but nonetheless it was there. And it did leave a mark on me, but I was determined to actually contribute to the knowledge that I had. At that time, Irene had set up THMP, but I thought, well, let me try volunteering in the local area where I live, which was Essex, but without much success. I guess my face didn't just quite fit. So as I approached Irene, who offered me to join, I felt really welcomed and celebrated for my knowledge and experience by Irene and THMB as a whole. The experiences I brought to the project, and some great challenging mediations came my way, which I felt enormously, intensely grateful for, that I could contribute and learn from the people of diverse backgrounds of how to mediate and actually get some sort of a settlement or agreement and actually bring an outcome, positive outcome to them. Irene and I talked a lot about culture, issues, the gaps in service provision for Tower Hamlets residents. We explored what mediation in such a diverse borough would mean for the volunteers. We had to consider the use of English as our primary language, as even though we had a considerable range of languages in our midst.
So English may not be the first language for a large majority of our parties, so we use interpreters. Most of our interpreters go on to train as mediators, and some, Asma, where are you? Some of our mediators go on to help with interpreting. We do pay a little one-off fee of £25 per referral to the interpreter. So there's many things that we must manage during a visit. And actually, a lot of my experience came from back in the day when I was at Tower Hamlets Mediation Service with people like Asma, who helped me to kind of really get some good understanding and background knowledge. So time is always going to be an issue. Obviously, it takes much longer to interpret everything into English and then back to the relevant language. The mediation is always run in English. If we send a Bengali mediator with a non-Bengali mediator and a Bengali interpreter, it can cause some confusion. And it needs confidence to direct the mediation into English, even though you may be the only non-Bengali in the room. We need to support our interpreters by explaining that everything that the party says will be interpreted for us, and then answering the party's questions. Even though initially they may well be intended only for the interpreter. For example, questions that I've heard again and again are, so what village are your parents from? Can you just tell us what to do? You can see Asma laughing. Sometimes they might tell the interpreter not to interpret something. Our well-trained interpreters will always interpret everything to the mediators. Sometimes the male head of the home is not present for the visit, but then would expect to attend any joint session. So we do need to encourage the man of the house to be there for the visit, because we don't want to set up a joint session with somebody that we haven't already met and we don't know how he's going to be. So white women, and I've said white women there, I probably shouldn't have said white women, but I learned not to offer my hand to shake hands with a Muslim man, because it can actually quite embarrass them if they don't shake my hand. So Zaza, the wonderful Zaza, taught me to put my hand on my heart and say, hello, I'm from Tower Hamlets Mediation Project. Removing shoes before entering an Islamic home is the norm. Not accepting food can be seen as a slight on the family. This is a recent one that I learned after all these years, but giving the thumbs up sign to a Bengali woman is seen as rude. Look at Asma laughing. You never told me that one, Asma. Pushing your hand up with your palm facing towards a Bengali lady, that will ultimately close her down for the rest of the visit. There can be different generations living in the one home. The tenant is not always the party, but as far as the referrer is concerned, they must be involved. So this can sometimes cause distrust if we ask for the tenant. Respect for elders is paramount. A young Bengali male mediator cannot be seen to have more power than the male head of the family. And the dynamics between a young female Bengali mediator and the male head of the family can be very challenging for the non-Bengali co-mediator to support, not to mention the struggles that she might be dealing with internally.
Okay. So the second part of what we are here is looking at culture. Let's look at that. I thought it would be useful to have a definition of what culture is. It's one that resonated with us. A culture is a way of life of a group of people, the behaviors, beliefs, and values, and symbols that they accept, generally without thinking about them, and that they are passed on along with by communication and imitation from one generation to the next. Now, culture is a wide subject, has many facets, but let's look at some of those layers of cultures. People, even within the same culture, carry several different layers of mental programming within themselves. Different layers of cultures exist at the following levels. The national level, that's associated with the nation as a whole. The regional level associated with ethnic, linguistic, or religious differences that exist within a nation. And I think I sort of briefly touched on that when I was talking about having experienced different cultures, the intra-cultures. Absolutely important to understand, even though we may be from one nation, but if we share the same heritage or the same country, there are regional differences that actually have a great impact on what we do and say. The gender level, without saying male, female, generational level. Again, a big issue about understanding the different cultural aspects between grandparents, parents, children. The social class level. This is about, the educational opportunities we've had and the jobs that the occupations that we can actually attain, and at the corporate level. This is the particular culture of an organisation. So all of us who work in an organisation will have experiencing different cultures within an organisation, with various organisations. When we move from one to another, you're experiencing the different cultures. Some of the manifestations of culture. Cultural differences manifest themselves in different ways and differing levels of depth. Symbols represent the most superficial values of culture, with heroes and rituals somewhere in between. What are symbols? Well, symbols are words, gestures, pictures, or objects that carry a particular meaning, which is only recognized by those who share a particular culture. And for me, what sticks out is the mini dress of the 60s within the UK. But yet, new symbols easily develop, so the miniskirt came. Old ones disappear. Symbols from one particular group are regularly copied by others. Therefore, symbols represent the most outer layer of a culture. The miniskirt, Halloween. Halloween is not a part of lots of cultures that are now present in the UK. However, they've been adopted to actually enjoy that festival. It may not have meaning, but they enjoy that. Heroes or persons, past or present, real or fictitious, who possess characteristics that are highly prized in a culture. They also serve as role models for behaviours, and a prime example of that is Churchill. Rituals are collective activities, sometimes superfluous in reaching desired objectives, but nonetheless, but are considered as socially essential. They are therefore carried out most of the time for their own sake. For example, ways of greeting, paying respect to others, religious, social ceremonies, etc. Henry Regatta comes to one. If we say going to church on a Sunday is one. So, just wanted to go back to reflect on when I came to the early 60s. As I said initially, that we settled in Yorkshire. The culture shock for us as children, and definitely for our parents, was enormous. However, by the mid-60s, my parents had made friends in the host community and were invited to the International Centre to teach how to make Asian dishes in those days. It was a rich and a rewarding experience. A warm glow goes inside me when I actually think about that, reflect on that experience, positive experience. Many a times I've now thought about those experiences. Yes, some people, as I said, called us by not very pleasant names. Yet others, like those at the International Centre, welcomed us with open arms and embraced the cultural differences. For our part, we were taught, take good from wherever you find it. And we did. Even the schools we attended, the headmistress and then the headmaster respected and accommodated our religious beliefs. I, for example, went to a Church of England school. I distinctly remember the headmistress saying to my father, but, very politely, very caringly, but this, you do realise this is a Church of England school. And my father promptly said, my children understand the beliefs and the values that they hold. So I have no problems with them experience. In fact, I want them to experience different cultures. So off we went and had a great time at that particular school. But it makes me think, so what made those individuals? One set of people were wanting to embrace the cultural differences that they saw, and others were very much about name calling, quite abusive, said something physical. What is it that makes people go into those camps? And well, what makes some individuals embrace cultural differences and others feel uncomfortable engaging? For some, there's a line in the sand that they're unwilling to cross. That's based on my own personal experiences and some of the neurosciences that I've learned. Now, we all hold certain beliefs, values, and behaviors developed over a lifetime of experiences, and they define who we are. That's our core. This is me, this is Nazim, this is Irene, this is one of you, Tom, Jones, or whoever we are. We hold those values and we that defines us. So what happens when people come across people who appear to have different beliefs, values, and behaviors? What I understand is that those that embrace it have a very clear understanding of their own core beliefs, values, and behaviors, yet are open, courageous, and flexible to grasp an opportunity to learn and grow. They also understand that others may require some more time and a different approach to help them test the waters, to enable them to engage and explore, and then perhaps brave enough to move beyond the core, to flex that core. Whilst others, as I've said, have drawn a line in the sand, and that's their core, and it will remain so, and nobody's going to tell them anything different. The core of a culture is formed by its values. They tend to be broad tendencies for preferences of a certain state of affairs: good, evil, right, wrong, natural, unnatural. But many values remain unconscious to those who hold them. Therefore, they often cannot be discussed. Nor can they be directly observed by others. Values can only be inferred by the way people act under different circumstances. Symbols, heroes, rituals are tangible, visible aspects of the practice of culture. But the true cultural meaning of the practice is intangible, revealed only when they feel safe to reveal the individual, with the individual receiving that information. So, you know, if you're going to share something, if you want to get to the core of those beliefs and values, you really have to build up trust. And that trust has to be an open and honest. The other person has to feel that they're in safe hands. It's all about communication. You know, communication is the central thread of life. So how we communicate will either help or hinder us in achieving our goals. And if we look at the context of mediation and where we do this community mediation, this is really critical. So, in any type of mediation, we may have one party that comes from a high context or a low context culture. So the knowledge and skill of the mediator to navigate safe and smooth communications between the parties is of paramount importance. Let's look at just what's the difference between high and low context culture. The differentiation between high and low context cultures is meant to highlight difference in verbal and non-verbal communication. High context cultures will use communications that focus on the underlying context, meanings, and tone in the message they're trying to convey, and does not rely just on the words themselves. Some of the countries that might fall into that category would be like Japan, China, France, Spain, Brazil, and more. On the flip side, low context cultures expect communications to be quite explicit, stated so that there's no risk of confusion. And if a message isn't clear, it will slow down the process of communication. In the most extreme cases, leaving any sort of wiggle room for interpretation can be disastrous in any communication. Now, some of the cultures that fall into this low context culture are cultures that of Western cultures, UK, Australia, United States. So what are the characteristics? If we look at the characteristics of high and low context cultures, I mean, cultures typically can't be organized strictly, so we can't say, you know, here is this culture, it's that. They sort of will fall between those two at times. But they share the characteristics of both the high and low context traits to varying degrees. Although it can be a complex characteristic, whether culture is high context or low context. For example, in a high context culture, similarity is an important characteristic because the majority of the population in high context cultures typically have the same level of education and have shared ethnicity, religion, and history. Through these shared experiences, message can be contextualized by assuming an audience will think in the same way and follow the same underlying message implicit in one's speech and writing. But in the low context cultures, the opposite is very true. They're usually diverse and focus on the individual instead of the group. Communication must be basic enough to allow for us as many people to understand as possible. So we talk about basic clarity of English if we take the UK, clear communication. Just as communication in general is different for high and low context cultures, the forms of communications also change because including the types of media that we enjoy in how we communicate. But in today's fast-paced digital age, these forms can shift, but the underlying preferences stay the same. Generally, high context cultures prefer oral communications, while low context cultures favor written communications. When it comes to emails, text, and online messaging, low context cultures use it to fire off quite quick messages, quick and frequent, perhaps frequent messages too. Low context cultures also want these communications to revolve around basic questions like, you know, what's happening, where's it happening, when's it going to happen, how is it going to happen? Whilst high context cultures tend to move in the other direction. So they're focusing on sort of long drawn out communication. And even then, perhaps the basics questions are not actually addressed. I've spoken about women as such, and we're looking at perhaps how empowerment and the gender issue comes into play within mediation within the community. Now, in some cultures, women don't appear to have the authority, the language, or the confidence to express exactly what their needs are. They remain well hidden below the iceberg. And it takes empathic questioning to empower them to go deep within to express their needs. Now, this may be a generalization, but women tend to be very intuitive and will pick up on the lack of integrity of the other person in the communication. So, as I said before, to reiterate, I think if you need to get to that place, there has to be that genuine integrity of how you communicate to open up somebody. Now, all things being equal, what really matters is openness, integrity, and intent. Why are we asking those questions? Will they help that person? And for the questioner, being self-aware of our core and how much can we flex, because we may see somebody who doesn't dress like us, doesn't speak like us, perhaps uses more verbal things as opposed to being quite to the point. Perhaps we can park some of those preconceived judgments and actually try and engage in that person in that open and honest way to get to what we want to achieve. Being self-aware means that we're being brave enough to look inside our core. Sometimes what stops us from flexing to go towards another person is that there's something within our core that might be sort of pinching us, but we're not willing to address it. We may not be proud of what we're actually holding our core, the beliefs of values and behaviours that stop us from practice. So for me, the takeaway on this particular aspect of the little bit that we've talked about in culture, because culture is so wide, multifaceted, but this little bit, which is about us, which goes a long way to actually understanding how we engage with understanding culture and how we engage, is not to prejudge others. Have been brave enough to have self-reflection of our core. I'm brave enough to challenge that core, to flex enough to be able to have a meaningful engagement with people.
Lovely. Thanks, Nazneen. And so, just to tail it off, back to our community mediation project. So our mediators have to work in the most diverse of boroughs, truly multicultural and cosmopolitan. It often transpires that some of our mediators have never set foot in a Bengali home, for example, and can be quite anxious about it, and vice versa, actually. We have had a few Bengali mediators and interpreters that have never been in a non-Muslim household. So during our training, day 4 is Diversity Day. We spent time looking at all aspects of isms. It's not just about culture, it's literally, we cover the whole gambit. We have very open discussions, and we even run a demo using interpreters. So our new mediators can get a real feeling for how it actually plays out. We do have some amazing support though from our absolutely amazingly diverse team on board our THMP ship. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank each and every one of them. And special thanks always to Becca Naylor at Reed Smith for the ongoing and most amazing support that they provide. Without Reed Smith, there'd be no THMP. So thank you all. Ta-da! Over to you, Jeffrey.
Great. Thanks very much, Irene and Nazneen. What a wonderful exposition of the work you do there in Tower Hamlets. Really impressive to hear, and all the things that you weave into your story and your explanation of the work that you do. It must be great for people working there and the services that you're providing to the community. But I will shut up and have a look at some of the questions that there's a fair bit of chat been going on, talking about people's various cultural backgrounds, the importance of summarizing, the benefits of co-mediation. I'm not going to go through those points for the time that's available, but try and get to some of the key questions here. So
I see one here, Jeffrey, from Abigail asking us
yes,
about how we decide on a mediation team in any given
exactly.
case.
Yeah,
so
do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, well, that is really, really important. Mostly, so Reed Smith always get first refusal because it is their project. So I offer the referral to Reed Smith. They normally prefer for one of their internal guys to work with one of our more experienced guys. So sometimes I don't always have as much choice in how I marry things up. I have only ever once sent out 2 blokes together, and they worked really well, actually, and it was fine on that particular mediation. But normally I always try to go for a male and a female, and if I see Dave Owen put white male and stale or something similar, so we try and send out a little bit of as much diversity as I can. Particularly in Tower Hamlets, because the households are so varied. So that's Abigail's.
Yes, there's another one Sorry, do you
Yeah.
want to control? There's one here from Claire Jarvis. I'm a mediator involved for West Ken mediation. And she goes on to say, are there any cultural issues to be aware of when you're mediating disputes involving people with poor mental health?
Yeah, so unfortunately, and I can see Claire's mental health issues have a feature of every dispute, including severe anxiety and PTSD. Yes, we've always had to deal. I mean, 1999, I trained as a mediator in Tower Hamlets. So I've been mediating in the borough for 22 years, and we have always had to deal with mental health issues. We're very sensitive around the whole aspect. I've had some lovely training from Marie Coombs as well. We always have to be very, very careful. And people think, well, if somebody's depressed, can we mediate them? Yes, of course we can. If they're okay and they want to have a mediation, why would we not go ahead with that? We have had some cases where we've had people who are suicidal. Those ones are particularly challenging. I've been advised by all and sundry, steer clear of them, but I don't. I do put our most experienced mediators on those particular referrals. But yeah, we do have to deal with all sorts of, we have a lot of harassment, and that creates fear and anxiety and stress of a really massive level. So we always have to be very compassionate and caring. And this is where I say about we signpost now. We signpost when we can. If we think that something will help, we will signpost. Mediators come back to me all the time asking me, what they can do. And yeah, I'm always happy to signpost on.
Okay, thanks for that. Moving on, we have Irene. You spoke about the benefits of online mediation. Of course, there are disadvantages as well. How do you see this in the future, post-COVID, if there is such a thing?
So 2 years ago, if you'd have asked me to do community mediation online, I would have just laughed at you. I mean, literally. However, 18 months on, I am flabbergasted at how well the project has adapted to being online. And like I said, our joint sessions have increased. Now, I did see somebody else's saying about, the technology and people don't have Zoom. Not all of ours have Zoom. We use WhatsApp, we use FaceTime, we use whatever they're comfortable with. And if that's just phone, then we'll do it just by phone. All we want to be able to do is support people to have that conversation. So however that happens, that's what we do. The disadvantages, I don't know. I mean, I'm laughing at myself because I don't know if there are disadvantages. I mean, maybe some of you community mediators out there might let me know, but I haven't come across any yet.
Okay, well, we'll leave that for people to think about. Moving on, what kinds of challenges are posed to mediators by parties having hybrid cultures? So that's from one of our colleagues out in India.
So can you say a little bit more about that? Who asked that question?
That's Kishore in India.
Kishore,
So
can
maybe,
you maybe unmute yourself and just explain what you mean? Hey, Kishore, I saw you there. Hi.
I actually see my question was in the context of low context and high context cultures.
Okay.
So there can be families or disputants who have the mixed cultures of the low and high. So in that scenario, I was asking if there are such cases, what happens?
Well, you know what? If you look down further, Kokila, who's one of our lovely mediators, she's done some training with Tony Bouin. And she said something here in one of the comments, and I agree with absolutely everything that she says. Kokila, where are you? Keela, can you come on and just tell us what you said? Putting you on the spot, but I can't find your
Hi,
comment.
Irene.
Hiya.
Yeah.
So what was it that you were saying about just treating everybody as an individual?
The chap Hofstede is really worth reading because the language and the ideas are just phenomenal. But ultimately, Irene, you wouldn't want me to treat you as the representative of your culture as being female, or perhaps I think you've got an Irish origin.
No.
No.
What would give you that impression?
I don't know. Are you laughing at me? Are you not?
Of course I'm Irish.
Right, so you wouldn't want me to make assumptions about you based on you being female or Irish.
No.
You'd want me to get to know you, wouldn't you?
Absolutely.
And we've got to know one another, haven't
Absolutely.
we? So these are like big boxes that we put ourselves and other people into, but people are people and we need to hear people, not labels. That's it, really.
Absolutely. I agree with that completely. Does that answer your question, Kishore?
Can I just come in there? I wonder where he's gone, but just to add to that, it's you don't treat people differently, but it's also about understanding that how one culture, as I've just explained, that with high and low context culture, somebody's actually wanting for you to understand not the words that they're saying, but what's underneath them, what they're meaning and the tone they've used. So the mediator needs to be aware of that difference between understanding and how they communicate. So actually getting more clarifications is important, because one will be just saying things, but actually the meaning is not coming out. So in a way, you're summarizing and you're also trying to elicit what they really, really mean in the words that they've used. So to answer your question, there's that aspect as well. No, of course you don't treat people differently, but you have to understand the difference between the high and low context. So if you've got somebody who speaks words, but there's another meaning in there, you have to get to the bottom of the iceberg to get what it is that they're trying to say.
There was one lovely lady, and I'm looking for her now. She wanted to get involved. Please, 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 I would love to have you on board. I'd love to talk to you. We are going to be putting on an online training session later this month. Okay. So it's for our volunteers, but I mean, basically, if anyone wants to join us, you know, it's Zoom. We can have as many as people are involved or what.
Can I join your training? Can I join?
Of course you can, Kishore. Why would you not? You can find us. What I'll do is I'll send my details to Will at Mediators Network. And then he can just invite you all. Or just find me on LinkedIn. That might be the better way.
Find you quite easily, and also through the links through the network, you'll be on there posted everywhere, Irene. So
there you go. Posted everywhere.
And then it gives everybody the onus to be proactive themselves, doesn't it, as well?
Absolutely. There you go.
So there's a behavioural thing if you want.
So here she is, Bibiana. Bibiana, am I pronouncing that properly? Yeah. Where are you, Bibiana?
Yes. Hi. Yes.
It was you're up there in the corner. Hello there.
Hi. Yeah. It was me who wrote that, because I really particularly liked you mentioning interpreters that kind of like sometimes put aside, but I am one of them, you know, quite a highly trained kind of interpreter and cultural mediator. And you know, I'm just kind of looking now to kind of diversify, really, because mediation is one of the things that I do as a kind of part of it. When they think, oh, we will have someone 2-in-1 kind of, you know, bilingual, you know, person who is highly trained and really aware, and plus is really good with conflict. So I'm really pleased to be part of this, you know, week of talks and kind of like a conference, because I just feel that I have so many transferable skills, and I work with communities in South Yorkshire, Nazin, so maybe not far from you. So I'm in Sheffield, but I used to live in London for many years, and was very much involved in cultural kind of and still am in cultural kind of disputes and conflicts that would come through the embassies, even, a diplomatic kind of level. But then from, very simple things, in community, I used to work in a huge multicultural school in Sheffield, but literally the community outreach was probably more important than actually teaching children who would come into school high up, after the weekend conflict in community. So literally, kind of bringing people together and just enhancing their knowledge. Somebody did ask, about if you have got disputants who also are not aware of each other's differences culturally. Sometimes that alone, you as a person can really step in and actually help them to move on with the conflict itself. That the conflict is actually not as big as the misunderstanding or not being aware of differences in culture or what's acceptable or not. So really particularly liked both of your kind of points to cultural sensitivities, to use of bilingual interpreters, and then training to be mediators or vice versa. And I'm very much looking forward to more information and being involved if I can help you in any way.
Definitely welcome on board, and give me a shout after this. I've got a dash after this because I'm going on to another training.
Yeah.
But I see something here from Eugenia. Have we got time to answer this,
well,
Jeffrey?
We can squeeze that one in. We're at 11 o'clock, but it's one of the last questions that came up, but a good one to answer.
Okay.
Go ahead, go for it.
So what happens if we can't find properly trained and certified interpreters for some language pairs? So I've had this talk with Nazneen. I use and have always used local people, and mostly mums. I train them off, and then they go out and they mediate, and it's a way of getting a little bit of cash, but it's also it raises their confidence, and it kind of gets them out sometimes. I mean, quite often we've had, and I mean, Asma can speak to this as well. Asma, how many young Bengali mediators did we take on board that went on to do all sorts of amazing things, including your brother? You're on mute.
So that,
at last count, wasn't that almost 50?
Yeah.
50,
so,
did you say? 50?
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
but it's amazing, because I mean, we've got mediators. Well, we took on interpreters who then got interested, wanted to train as mediators, trained as mediators, and then were able to go out and do other jobs because they had the confidence. So we don't have certified interpreters because they would be too expensive for our project. We couldn't afford them. We have local people, and we empower these local people to get involved, and we raise their confidence, and then they come back to the project each and every time.
Sounds like it brings great diversity and inclusion to it, but those of us that are also trained are also willing to give our services for free. Depends on our values, Irene, on this.
Yes, but I think most of our THMP volunteers have got the most amazing values, because
exactly.
they come to us because they're giving back.
Exactly. I think that's probably the main questions covered. Is there anything else, Nazin and Irene, that you want to close with? Any final comments before I?
Just to say thank you for being here. Yep.
Great.
So, hope you got something from it.
Yeah, I was trying to read all of these comments, but and thank you, Natalia. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. It's been lovely, and it's always a pleasure and a privilege to be able to talk about mediation and our project. And Dave Owen, you asked me, could you heckle me? And I told you no, and you still have in the comments. I don't know what I'm going to do with you.
That was a very gentle heckle.
Thank you for that, Dave. And it's good to bring people back that know each other so well, but also an opportunity for new people to network and get to know each other from this session. So Nazneen and Irene, thank you so, so much for this wonderful session.
Welcome.
Today. We really appreciate it. Thank you everybody for attending and participating so well. A great thanks to our sponsors, including the delightful Marie Coombs, who was on the call earlier as well. And don't forget to have a look at the listings for other sessions that are taking place today and through the rest of the week. We have our keynote global debate at the end of the week, chaired by Jonathan Lux. So that's something to look forward to. And a final plug for the Mediator Network, which is if you either register, renew your membership in the month of November, you get it at the reduced price of £99 for the next 12 months. And you can add that on to your existing membership. So it's something I'm going to do. Meanwhile, thank you very much, and see some of you at the next session for the UK, which starts in about 20 minutes, half an hour. So thank you very much, everybody, and goodbye. Bye-bye.